Hello, my name's David Roth and a very warm welcome to the web seminar for the BrandZ Top 100 Most Valuable Global Brands 2017. In today's broadcast, we're going to cover how the brands are valued, unveil the number one, uncover the fastest risers and new entrants as we count down the BrandZ Top 100 Most Valuable Global Brands 2017. Exclusive interviews with Sir Martin Sorrell and Eric Salama, CEO and Chairman of Kantar. Explore what's happening in the brand categories and markets around the world. Take a look at the highlights from WPP's DNA of Tomorrow's marketing event in New York. And BrandZ's Top 100 Most Valuable Chinese Brands 2017 launch in Beijing. We'll take a deep dive into the Chinese and Latin American brand market. Learn about brands in Cuba. Discuss this year's hot brand building trends with Lindsay Patterson, Tamara Ingram and Kate Ward, plus hear from some of the CMOs of brands around the world. You'll also be able to find out how to get more information, download the entire report and get access to our mobile apps and presentation charts. Plus, a lot more. So sit down, turn up the volume as you watch live the BrandZ Top 100 Most Valuable Global Brands 2017 launch broadcast. Wow, we've got an amazing amount to cover in such a short amount of time. My name's David Roth from WPP, and it's my pleasure to present the BrandZ Top 100 Most Valuable Global Brands live seminar here from London. If you've got a question that you'd like to ask us, feel free to either send me an email or a tweet, and we'll do our very best to answer it on air. If not, we will do that after the program's finish. Well, I'm joined by Elspeth Chung. Elspeth is the head of valuations for Kantar Millwall Brown, and is the person responsible for doing all the valuations, including the top 100. Elspeth, a very warm welcome.
Hello, David.
We've already had questions before this. People wanted to know, or actually, how do you go about valuing the brand? So that's probably the best place to start. What's your answer?
Yeah, right. When people think about BrandZ, a lot of times the first thing that will come to mind is the brand value ranking. But in fact, BrandZ is much more than that. So every year we go out to talk to consumers around the world about their perceptions of brands. And this forms the largest brand equity platform in the world. So apart from that brand value number that we present to everyone every year at the same time, every year, what we do is we can also tell people, number one, what happened to your brand, how did you get there, and what you have to do next. And that's also what makes BrandZ the most superior and differentiated brand value ranking in the world.
Now, there are two major component elements to arriving at a dollar value of a brand. There's what we call brand, or you call brand contribution.
Right.
And there's obviously the financials. Just talk us through that.
Right. In BrandZ, when we do the valuation, we have two main components. Number one, financial value, which measures the dollar value that a brand directly contributes to its brand owner. So second of all is brand contribution. It measures a brand's ability to, number one, to increase volume and to charge premium. And this is very important, a very important part of the brand valuation framework, because all this brand contribution data is based on actual consumer research. And that tells how consumers' perception will affect their purchase decisions, and at the end, it will all convert to the financial return of a brand. So financial value together with brand contribution formed what we call brand valued. And this is also the basis of how we rank brands in our BrandZ ranking.
Now, brand valuations and brand value is one thing. looking at what's happened in terms of performance of the stock market is another. What do we see when we look at our strong brands and performance in terms of shareholder value?
The shareholders' value, so since we introduced our ranking 12 years ago in 2006, we have been tracking the share price performance of our strong brands in the BrandZ portfolio. So what we find is if we invested $100 on day one, our return today is almost $125, and that is 50% more than what S&P can give to an average investor in the market. So that shows that clearly brand is not a cost, it's not an expense, it's an investment in an asset that could give a brand owner considerable return in the long term.
So driving brand value, investing in brands generates significant economic return and it's much superior shareholder performance. Elspeth,
Correct.
Thank you very much indeed. You
Thank
can
you, David.
learn more about how the ranking is done with a much longer video that Elspeth has done in terms of understanding the methodology, plus in the report there is a section on the methodology, and I'll be giving you details of how you can download both of those at the end of this broadcast. Now, Sir Martin Sorrell is a difficult man to track down. He's every day in a different market, a different country, talking to different people and different clients. But I managed to snare him at our London head office, and we had a wide-ranging conversation about the world's economy, about brands, and about what's on WPP's agenda. Let's take a look at what he said. Well, Martin, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Gosh, grief. Time flies.
And time does fly, because this time last year, David Cameron was the Prime Minister of the UK.
Yeah.
The smart money was on Britain remaining in the EU, and that Hillary Clinton would be the Prime Minister.
Was it smart money or dumb money?
Well, clearly it turned out to be dumb money.
It was dumb money,
so
dumb judgments.
What happened?
Well, the judgments were wrong, weren't they? We were sort of sitting in a bubble talking to one another, David, instead of probably doing our proper research. Maybe the samples were wrong. You know, the East Coast Liberals were talking to the East Coast Liberals, and the West Coast Liberals were talking to West Coast Liberals, and London was, well, it wasn't the South East, because the South East by and large voted for Brexit, but the intelligentsia, so-called, in the UK were talking to one another, and they clearly misread the mood, misread the sort of anti-globalization, if that's the right way of putting it, populist feeling that still exists, and it'd be interesting to see what happens in the UK election. Here we are on the cusp of the polls are tightening as we speak. I think somebody said to me it was down to six percentage points between Conservative and Labour. So Jeremy Corbyn might be Prime Minister.
Well, in the context of that then, how do you see the world's economic tectonic plates and the impact for business decision making? Because clearly things are changing.
World economic growth is slow. Inflation is low, although there's clearly inflation growing in the UK because of the weakness of the pound post-Brexit. When we might get more inflation if President Trump implements his tax plans in America. But by and large, there's very little inflation, very little pricing power as a result, and therefore clients are very focused on costs. So for the advertising and marketing services industry, I think it's totally wrong. The investment in branding is not as strong as it should be. And I should add investment in innovation and branding, because I think the key to long-term growth and successful long-term strategies is innovation and brand. And we know from the data that you do at BrandZ or BrandZ, that we do at BAV and elsewhere, that investing in innovation and investing in branding, it accelerates total shareholder return and share prices, and that the strongest brands are the ones that do best against an S&P 500 or an MSCI.
Given the context of that, one of the things clearly we do when we value brands is have a good look at the balance sheet. There's an inordinate amount of cash on most
relatively
companies'
unleveraged
balance sheet.
Yeah.
Given that, why is there such shareholder activization at the moment?
Cheap money.
And what implications does that have to us?
No, cheap money. It's as simple as that, I think. Warren Buffett, I remember at the Microsoft conference, said You know, he never thought in his he would see in his lifetime ability to borrow 30-year money at such a low rate, and you know, you could buy baked beans and tomato ketchup, and that grows or tends to grow year by year. So it's the cost of money is so low, and interest rates have remained lower longer than people projected, and I think a lot of people believe they'll stay lower longer than people think. I mean, they will rise, but they're not going to rise as much as people thought, and it's going to take a longer time for them to rise. I mean, we've seen with the Fed at the moment, there's some suggestion that some of the data they're seeing is not quite as enthusiasm making for raising rates as before, and that people would be very worried about choking off continued growth. So I think the cheap money is driving. So there are three forces: technological disruption, activist investors, and zero-based budgeting, which is very focused on costs. Those are the three forces. The last two, activist and zero-based budgeting, I think are driven to a large extent by cheap money. And as long as that persists, you're going to continue to see the pressure. There's also, we've had a long cycle since 2009. We're seeing a lot of M&A activity, probably because people have run out of opportunities. They're seeing slow growth, and they run out of opportunities to cut costs, so they need another beast to get their teeth into.
Tomorrow is the WPP annual general shareholder meeting.
Yes.
Here in London.
Right.
When you address the meeting, what direction will you be saying WPP is going in, and also, you know, the direction of the marketing industry worldwide?
Well, four strategic objectives for us: horizontality, to get just as we brought BrandZ or BrandZ and BAV together, horizontality, working together, not against one another, but working together for the benefit of clients. That what clients want is the best integrated response to their needs, or their opportunities and their challenges. Secondly, the growing importance of digital, which is already 40% of our business, and we want it to be even more, and you won't be able to distinguish it in short order between analog and digital. Fast growth markets, 30% of our business. We want it to be about the same as digital.
And
40,
you're still
45.
bullish about fast growth markets?
Absolutely, because the next billion, it's very simple. The next billion consumers are not going to come from the US and Western Europe. And whatever is happening to multinational companies, and some interesting articles recently about whether multinational companies are as profitable as they used to be, whether they're growing as fast as they used to be. I mean, a lot of that's to do with currency, the strength of the dollar, but it's also to do with the fact that the BRICS and Next 11 slowed, although they, you know, when we look at the Next 11 in our case, we'd still see significant growth and in fact a pickup. But of the BRICS, India is the only one which is continuing to rev along, and even that demonetization has checked a little bit of it. But the BRICS and Next 11 are going to supply that next billion consumers. So, my view, you need increased focus on that. And then the final point is data, which is 25% of our business, or quantitative disciplines, about half of our business, and that's right. So, more from WPP on that, and we'll be featuring particularly the horizontality part of that at the AGM. But generally, to stress this message that investment, you know, what people call capex rather than opex. I mean, there's tremendous pressure on operating expenditure and operating costs, and that has resulted in very little investment capex. In fact, if you plot investment as a portion of GDP, pretty much, you know, whichever of the mature countries you look at, whether you look at the US or the UK or France, Germany, Italy, Spain, it's been on a downward track since the 80s. I mean, it's recovered since the recession of a deep recession of 2009. But essentially, the animal spirits are dull. The S&P 500 is effectively shrinking because they're paying back more than 100% of their earnings to investors in the forms of dividends and buybacks. That's effectively saying we are abrogating responsibility for reinvestment of the profits we make into the business and giving it to the shareholders to decide what they do with it. I think that's wrong. And the irony of all that is that the companies that take the long-term view are the control companies, the ones that tend to offend the corporate governance wonks who, you know, one man, one vote, one woman, one vote, which we could all agree with, that's democracy. But on the other hand, if you're worried about being turfed out for having taken too much risk, or make a mistake, I mean, for every 2 successes, you would hope you'd only have 1 failure, and you've got to take some risks.
If you look at the BrandZ top 100 most valuable global brands 12 years ago, when you were responsible for starting the notion of doing this, compared to today,
when I was frustrated that one of our competitors seemed to have a monopoly on brand. Now we have the superior technique by far. They just do some sort of panel of experts, maybe modified with a little bit of data. We have this very sophisticated measurement of not just brand metrics but financial metrics. And now I think we've established, or you've and your crew have established, Doreen and everybody else have established BrandZ or BrandZ as the market leader, but we have to make it even more famous.
We're putting together BrandZ and BAV together. You might say, about time too. Yeah. Taking longer than you wanted it to happen.
It is about time, yes. It's taken a long time, like pulling teeth.
What advantage do you think that's going to give both the group and, I suppose, more importantly, our clients?
Well, I mean, you know, if we look at the branding survey this year, which is what, our 12th, right?
12th year, yeah.
Yeah. The fearsome 5, as we call them, you know, top it. So we have Google and Apple and Microsoft and Amazon and Facebook are all topping the list.
Of course, most of those 12 years ago
didn't exist.
And
the 5 that were at the top 12 years ago employed a lot more people, which raises all sorts of social issues going back to where we started. But putting BAV together with BrandZ or BrandZ, I think gives us even more clout in the brand valuation space, and also deals with what I think is the fundamental issue, is demonstrating clearly that what we do adds value, and the clients fail to invest in advertising and marketing at their peril. That if you're in the business of building, so going back to John Brown's definition of what, you know, he was talking about CSR, and he said, you know, if you're in the business of building long-term brands, you won't ignore all the stakeholders and communities you operate in. Well, I would say if you're in the business of building long-term brands, you won't reduce, diminish, cut to oblivion your investment in advertising and marketing, because that's the lifeblood. And once you see volume growth start to tail off, and there are many examples of where some clients are maybe getting a little bit of revenue growth because of pricing, a little bit, particularly in Latin America, for example. But when you see those volumes tail off, that's the danger signal. And that's when you have to reinvest. And maybe getting the balance between advertising and promotion is important. Instead of paying large amounts of money for slotting allowances and the like, what you should be doing is investing in the brand, not just in what we do, but, you know, adjunct or the origins of what we do in innovation. I mean, in FMCG, for example, which is under significant pressure for all sorts of reasons, the free technological disruption, activist investors and ZBB, what you have to do is to innovate. Or you innovate or you die, and I think you innovate and you advertise or you die.
Innovate, advertise or die.
Yes.
That's a great way to leave it. Monticello, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Well, a few months ago, we hosted a seminar looking at the DNA of tomorrow's marketing with senior marketeers and clients in New York. They touched on some of the themes that Martin spoke about as well. So let's take a look at what they had to say.
No consumer that we're trying to reach has to settle for average anymore. They can have the best price, the best quality product, the best customer service. So in order for us to engage them and to make them pay attention, we all have to deliver amazing.
Big data, big data, big data. As a marketer, every time I pick up the phone, I get sold something around data, which is important, but I have no idea what to do with that data. So that becomes a critical component from a serviceability standpoint, how we think about things. No one needs another dashboard. Only people need usable insights and usable data.
Finding the right problem is often more important than coming up with a great solution. And
so I think there is a tension between us wanting privacy, not to be talked to and spooked, and yet recognising that the more personal and more relevant, the more likely we are to close a sale.
The common assumption is that young people hate advertising. 32% of them have an ad blocker installed on their mobile device. Well, they actually love advertising. They just smell bullshit from a mile away. And they want it to be authentic, they want it to be meaningful, and they want it to be purposeful.
There's this idea that intimacy and personalization is all about being stalked and being sold and being pushed things. But at the end of the day, there are consumers who actually want something. And there's many, many flavors of it.
This idea of loyalty, this idea of intimacy, this idea of service, that human connection isn't just content. It's how you relate them to the brand so that they want more. Imagine a world where we have more of the greatest luxury in the world, which is time, because of things like artificial intelligence, autonomous cars, etc., and what you would do at that time.
For your innovation teams, it's really understanding where we are, where your current audience is, and what is actually going to satiate them and delight them, and not just inundate them with kind of the bells and whistles.
Where we are very close to being is being able to take on a one-to-one level when people inbound, take all the information that we have about them, predict what's going to be the most effective creative breakdown for them, the right promotion, the right tagline, the right image, serve it to them, learn dynamically on the fly, and re-update the engine, done at a scale of 1 million.
I think the future of advertising and ads is content that matters to people in environments that hopefully take away friction and exceed expectation. I think unlearning is probably the biggest next step. To me, you can't go wrong when you're sort of aligning yourself around meeting or exceeding the consumer's expectations, and there's business outcomes associated.
You're listening to the BrandZ Top 100 Most Valuable Global Brands 2017 live web seminar from here in London. My name is David Roth. If you want to ask a question to any of the BrandZ team, please send me an email or a tweet, and we'll do our best to answer that for you live on air or afterwards if we don't have enough time to do that. We've talked quite a lot already about the top 100 most valuable global brands, so now is the time to reveal the top 100 most valuable global brands 2017. Wow, what an amazing top 100, and a lot to talk about the top 100. And with me to do that is Dorian Wang. Dorian is the global head for BrandZ, for Kantar Millwall Brown. Dorian, thank you very much, and my partner in crime in this BrandZ project.
Thank you, David.
Dorian, what do you make of it, the new 2017 top 100?
Despite all these geopolitical uncertainties, 2017 has been a very good year for brands. The total value of the top 100 has grown by 8%. Compared to last year, 3%, that is a significant increase. The total value of the top 100 brands has reached to $3.6 trillion US dollars. That number looks very big. Actually, that's
big.
Yeah, that's a huge number. It's even bigger than the country GDP of Germany. So 100 brands' value is larger than the fourth economy in the world.
Now, what do we see in terms of the top of that top 100, our top 5 brands?
So you have found out who is number one. So Google continues to grow its value by a healthy 7%, and it remains as the most valuable brand.
And a big congratulations to Google for that. That's an amazing achievement.
Well done, Google. And followed by Apple with a modest 3% value increase. And our number 3 is Microsoft. Microsoft has also achieved an 18% value increase in the past year, mainly contributed by its healthy business in the cloud service. And Microsoft is also our top B2B brand. And the last year is absolutely worth highlighting one of our top risers, Amazon. Amazon has a significant value gain, that is 41% in the past year. And Amazon has expedited its journey from a pure e-commerce brand and now to an ecosystem brand, including video, music, Alexa. Everywhere consumers are going, Amazon is surrounding it.
This really is the fearsome 5, isn't it?
Yes, yes. Together with Facebook, that's the fearsome 5.
Now, we've been brand valuing for the top 100 for 12 years. It's interesting looking back to see what we can understand from history to today. What are the big stories looking over that period of time?
Yeah, over the past decade, a key finding is the strong brands are getting stronger. So the top 10 most valuable brands today is worth the entire 100 value in 2006. And just in the past year, 3 new brands has surpassed the $100 billion threshold. And this year we have 9 brands and worth $100 billion. And among our top 10, 9 are from the United States and 1 from China.
We'll talk about China a little bit later on in our broadcast. Looking at the top 10, when we started versus today, it seems like a different universe.
Yes, David, let's travel back the time machine and went back to 2006.
Do I get my hair back?
Yes, you will.
Great.
And that was the time we would drive a Toyota and get to city and get some cash and shop in Walmart, probably put Coca-Cola and Marlboro in our basket. Those are still very strong brands. However, they are not in the top 10 anymore. It's mainly because consumers' journey, consumers' footprint have changed. And think about the consumer's journey today. We may find something very interesting from Google and shop by our iPhone and get Amazon and Alexa delivered at our front door. And because of this consumer's journey change, these platform brands are playing a more and more important role.
Now, technology brands this year have grown, by some 14%?
Yes, and compared to the non-technology brands, in 4%, so there is a big advantage. And when we look at our fearsome 5, 4 out of the top 5 are AI-ready ecosystem brands. Google Assistant, Alexa, and Cornada. So all of these brands are trying to build the truly ecosystem brands around the consumers' lives.
Now, the very sharp-eyed of you would have seen in that video, being able to point out the newcomers, but maybe not everybody has managed to spot them. Let's just take a look at who they are, what observations there are.
Absolutely. Welcome to our newcomers to the 2017 list. They are Xfinity, YouTube, HPE, Salesforce, Netflix, Snapchat, and Sprint. And these 7 brands have one thing in common. They are all from the United States. They are the new Silicon Valley generation brands. So from the day one they were born, and they have global in their mindset, and all of them are significantly younger than the average of our brand age.
So we are beginning to see some of those younger Silicon Valley upstart brands now become very valuable brands in their own right. For the moment, Doreen, thank you very much indeed. You will be back a little later with some more analysis.
Thank you, Dave.
Now, during the course of the year, we spend quite a lot of time talking to CMOs around the world of issues that are concerning them, issues related to brand building. Let's take a glimpse of some of those conversations.
And today, if you look at most of the customer, they don't do one channel. They do multiple channels, okay? Sometimes they do online, sometimes they do offline. Some category they do online, some category they do offline. And those group of people, consumers, they are looking for quality product, quality service. This also gave the e-commerce, particularly like the JD.com, because we're committed to give consumer the superior shopping experience, a great opportunity to grow. So there is quite a lot of things we need to transform, and we are exactly in the right time to think about that and to set the direction. And then we do this transformation step by step. One thing I don't think that will change is our customer-centric philosophy. That one remains same. Because we believe no matter how external change, so we can leverage those technology, but the fundamental, understand the customer needs, delight them, or even exceed their expectation. It's our fundamentals of the business.
10 years back versus today, the consumer is very, very different in terms of expectation of what products are going to do to them, are much, much better informed, questioning a lot more, and making far more informed choices. So they read the labels, they are very conscious about the health aspects of products they are taking. So what is it going to do to them? So they are clearly asking a lot more questions than they ever did. Consumers have a point of view. Consumers are sharing a lot of things. They are very expressive today. So getting them early on in the stage of development, rather than you have the product ready and show, okay, do you like it and what do you say? But it's better to have consumers participate in our development process at an early stage, and co-creating the product with them makes a big difference in getting the innovations right. But the fact is, consumers' thirst for new products, new capability, new evolving needs is so high that you need to speed up your innovation, and you have to constantly look at what is that consumer's going to look next.
Today, we have to go back in different way to the days when retail was a one-on-one understanding of your customer base, kind of that local shop fitter that you knew very well on their first name basis. Yeah. It's data driven, but it is also basically driven by a forensic and detailed research and conversation with your customer. So it is not about the amount of data you're collecting, it's picking the right signal, and most importantly, doing something about it. 20 years ago, we probably had 3 or 4 levers to pull. Today you're basically in the cockpit of Concorde, traveling at Mach 2 because that's the speed of it, and you have an instrumentation and a dashboard which is much more complex. And it is how we are all, as retailers and brand, deciding what lever to activate. So I don't think retailing is for the risk averse. I think you need to really fundamentally understand the dynamics that are playing, but it's a fascinating time to be in retail. There is a great demand for uniqueness, specialness.
Well, I'm now joined by Martin Guerrera, who is the Global Research Director for Kantar Millward Brown for BrandZ. Martin, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
No problem.
We've seen who's in the top 100. We've looked at some of the overall trends in that. We'd like to have a view and analysis from you, just looking at some of the trends? What are the key trends that cut across, every single category and, to some extent, every single brand?
Sure. Well, it's a good question. I think the one that cuts across all categories is really the importance of meaningful difference. So clearly we've been running the rankings for 12 years now. So looking back over that 12-year period, we can see how meaningful difference is not only important to drive value, but is actually a predictor of value over time. So what we did, just to explain this analysis, was we took the 86 common brands that we've got valuations numbers for between 2006 right the way through to this year, and looked back to see how meaningfully different were those brands in 2006 and look at the difference in value growth over time. And what we found was those that were the most meaningfully different back then actually grew at a far faster rate in value terms than those that were the least meaningfully different, almost 5 times the rate in fact. So we can really see that over time, meaningful difference adds value.
And this chart illustrates that, I suppose, in terms of that sort of 12-year progress and the value growth you get out of that. So the lesson is what?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that the lesson is that it's becoming increasingly difficult to break into the top 100. The bar is getting ever higher in terms of how meaningfully different those brands are. So it's really the goal of everyone in the brand building industry to imbue your brand with difference, imbue your brand with meaning is the best route to break into the rankings, but most importantly, drive the value of your brand forwards.
A few minutes ago with Doreen, we looked at the difference between the top 10 12 years ago, the top 10 today. Let's take a look at the change we've seen in the sectors and the values of the sectors over that period of time.
Yeah, I mean,
it's quite dramatic, isn't it?
It is. I mean, the category effect is very striking, particularly with regards to technology. So technology brands now account for more than half the total value of the ranking, which is a huge shift from where we were back in 2006. And technology brands are huge innovators, and even today we've seen Apple announce the HomePod system, and that artificial intelligence element is going to be one of the new battlegrounds for the future. But certainly, technology brands are going from strength to strength.
If we take a look at some of the sectors, what do we see? Let's start with apparel.
Yeah, apparel is interesting because we've really seen the rise of the sportswear brands. So brands like Nike, Adidas, Lululemon, Under Armour taking a bigger slice of the apparel pie, and we can see the growth over time. So again, if we compare 2006 to 2017, by this year, the sportswear brands are practically on a par with other brands in terms of their total value, and they've really ridden the trend of athleisure and fashion in many ways as well. And the way that they've been able to do that is by having an increased focus on brand purpose. Innovation, as we've talked about from a technology perspective, is being important, but for any category, innovation is important. We certainly see the sportswear brands as more innovative as the non-sportswear brands in apparel, and ultimately they're delivering a stronger brand experience, which has led to that growth over time.
Sure. Once we take cars, a category close to my heart, having worked in the car market for many years.
Yeah, cars is interesting because, as we'll see, there's 3 categories which have shown a trend towards luxury brands and a premiumisation, if you like. So cars is certainly one, and again, if we compare 2006 to 2017, by this year we've actually seen the luxury car brands accounting for almost 2/3 of the total value of cars. So and certainly the rise of Tesla, for example, is a big contributor.
And this sort of move to luxury is something that, again, we see across a number of the categories.
Yeah.
Personal care is another example.
Yeah, personal care is another one, which is interesting. So if we think of the mass brands, those are the brands that are going to meet needs at quite a basic level, but ultimately the trend amongst consumers has been to demand a more premium offer, brands that are building stronger emotional connections, and consumers are willing to pay for that premiumization, but also the personalization. So brands like Clinique, L'Oreal are good examples of playing in that space, and the growth has been clear to see.
Now, you would have thought sort of luxury is luxury, but even luxury has a luxury part of the market.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing the development of the super luxury brands, so brands like Rolex, Hermes, Chanel, and again, they've been on the rise. So by this year, we're seeing huge value growth, huge premiumization, but ultimately these brands are able to justify their increased price by building meaningful difference. So even within the luxury category, we see that building meaningful difference is the route to value growth.
Marvellous. Martin, don't go anywhere. You'll be back in a minute. Now, you're listening to the Top 100 Most Valuable Global Brands 2017 web seminar. My name's David Roth from WPP, and if you want to ask a question, just send me an email or a tweet and we'll do our best to answer it online for you. All the data, the charts, the analysis that you see today and videos are available for you to download and use with your teams and clients, and I'll be giving you the URL of how you can download those at the end of the broadcast. Now, whilst we use the BrandZ data to do brand valuations, we also use the data to do a lot of other things as well. And I just want to highlight 3 BrandZ products which are new, which you might not have come across, and we very much suggest that you take a look at. The first is Social Z, and that is where we look at how a brand is performing across the various different social feeds, and these are live dashboards looking at all the various different social feeds from YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook and the like. The second is Innovation Z. We know from the BrandZ data how important innovation is, and we've seen it in action within the new rankings of the top 100 today. And Innovation Z gives you an understanding of how innovative your brand is and is seen, and some innovations that are going on in the relevant marketplace to your brand. And lastly, WebZ, which will be launched in next couple of weeks, which will give you an understanding of how your brand is doing on the web. You can get access to all of those, plus a lot more, by going onto the BrandZ site within Inside WPP, and all you need to access that is your Inside WPP password. Now, we've talked with Martin and with Doreen about some of the themes. Some of those included new entrants and top risers. So let's take a look at, for 2017, our top risers and new entrants. Well, Martin, what observations do you see from that list of brands?
Well, it's a very interesting list. I think if we start with Adidas, our fastest riser of the year, Adidas is really the perfect storm of a brand that offers sport, fashion, and increasingly technology. So they've been able to offer 3D printing of shoes to enhance customer experience in store. And as we can see, their meaningful difference has really risen at an incredible rate over the last few years as a result of some of those trends.
And what about Amazon, the mighty Amazon?
Yeah, Amazon's interesting. So although Adidas is our top riser in percentage terms, Amazon is our top riser in dollar value, so up by a massive 40 billion this year. And Jeff Bezos, the Amazon CEO, is about, we're told, to become the richest man in the world, which is indicative of how fast their share price has risen in the last year. And really, Amazon is a classic example, and Jeff Bezos talks about this day one mentality, which really means that they're super focused on innovation. It's all about the next thing. So they've launched Amazon Go, Amazon Prime membership is up hugely. Amazon Web Service is doing well. Echo and Alexa obviously made headlines and have driven revenue this year, so a fantastic year for Amazon.
And Tesla, interesting one on that list.
Yeah, Tesla's another interesting one. So I think when we talk about disruption, Tesla for me are the true disruptor of a very big established market, obviously the car market. And when we talk about brand purpose, again, they are laser focused on their purpose. So when we look at the purpose figures within BrandZ, the brands that are making people's lives better, Tesla is very high up that list, which is adding huge value to their brand.
Well, Martin, thank you very much indeed. You'll be back a little bit later. But for the moment, Martin Guerrero from Canton Millwall Brown, thank you very much.
Thanks,
indeed.
David.
Now, some of the themes from a geopolitical basis that's going on at the moment are things that brands can't ignore any longer. And I spoke about this with Tamara Ingram, the global CEO of J. Walter Thompson. Well, I'm now joined by Tamara Ingram, who's the global CEO of J. Walter Thompson. Tam, thank you very much indeed for joining us. You join us at an interesting time. Yesterday, President Trump withdrew the US from the Paris climate agreement. We've seen various different brand owners, entrepreneurs, make a stand already on that. Tim Cook for Apple has already spoken out about it. Elon Musk from Tesla has withdrawn from certain committees that he was sitting on for the Trump administration. Is it now impossible for brands to escape the political climate?
I think brands need to be authentic to their purpose and to their benefit, and within the context, stay true to that. I do think there is a context, however, and I think people have an expectation with what is difficult in the world and what feels like some tough messages, whether it's Syria or whether it's politics, that brands are a ray of hope. Not unrealistic hope, but a ray of hope. So have a sense of purpose in life and are true and connected to their benefits.
Does this not place brands in a very difficult position, though?
It depends how brands behave. If brands take on a political stance, I think it does place them in a difficult position. But if brands are true to what they naturally offer, true to why they are around, true to their role, then I think brands can play a very important part of the world by, in a sense, bringing people together and giving people a sense of benefits by what they offer.
And what?
Can I give you an example?
Sure, please, yeah.
So there's a brand that J. Walter Thompson look after called Elevate, which is in China, and it's to help women who are pregnant. And in today's world, a brand needs to, as I say, have a purpose, and a purpose that not only delivers a benefit, which is helping nutrition for people who are pregnant, but also a sense of utility. So an insight in China is that men are not allowed to go to a women's first scan. So what Elevate did is created a utility which meant that after a woman had her first scan, she was given a product that she could place on her husband's heart so he could feel the baby's first heartbeat. Lovely. So what did that do? It was wonderful. It created a conversation in China, big conversation to want people to talk about why can't they be there and what it's like to participate. It elevated Elevate the brand and its role it had in women's pregnancy, and it gave a fantastic benefit and emotionally brought husband and wife together in a very moving time. So I think brands can play a very important role in a political environment, but they have to do it from their truth. Otherwise, there are authentic issues, and also I think it creates disbelief and cynicism.
And what role is there for us as marketeers and communicators to work with the clients in order to understand the parameters of what would be good for them in that context and what would be straying into difficult territory?
I think we have a hugely important role to understand the brand and the consumer need, and not to go away for authenticity. So if we think of a number of clouds, there have been a lot of stories about that recently. when brands try to co-opt politics or go against what is naturally theirs, it causes a great deal of cynicism and actually rejection of the brand. So our role is always to be true to that brand and to make sure that purpose isn't so disconnected from actually what the brand's benefit offers that, again, it creates a rise of cynicism. I think we're in a fantastic place to help when it's in a politically slightly dark environment, to help people feel optimistic and to deliver benefits.
One of the things that we're seeing more of across the world is countries looking inward as opposed to looking outward. One of the things that obviously brands do around the world is create large amounts of employment. Do you think that brands have underplayed their role in society in that respect?
I don't think people are interested in brands and how they've created employment. I do think they're interested in corporate brands, if I can separate the two, and how they've created employment. And I think we have absolutely underplayed that. I'm very proud of working with 4WPP and the amount of people we employ. I'm very proud of having a number of clients who employ over 100,000 people. These are jobs, mortgages, livelihoods, health, education, well-being, reading, getting people out of poverty. And I think we forget sometimes that that plays an enormous role in society. So I think when we look after corporate brands as opposed to product brands, I think it's hugely important to stress that.
We've just seen the Co-op in the UK launch a campaign where they talk about using only British beef, not just about the quality aspects of that, but also about how that creates employment and how that helps individual local towns and societies thrive. Do you think more and more brands and marketeers will be using local communities as the forefront of some of their marketing campaigns going forward?
It is very clear to me that intense localization is where the world is going. So we've got a paradox of, yes, very global, but true intensely local, and I think brands will pick up on that. In fact, indeed, I think you could get different benefits from products depend on the location. I think the more AI they'll have, the more we're able to get people in reality in real time, and then the more the local will become very important. So yes, I think that will happen, but I suspect the more that happens, there'll be a counter trend of connecting with global communities. But absolutely, I think localization is a key trend.
And finally, Tamara, it's just a few weeks' time until Cannes starts, I suppose the Oscars for the advertising industry. What do you think the key themes this year are going to be in Cannes?
I think the key themes will be at two extremes. At one extreme, it'll be about AI, it'll be about technology, it'll be about utilization. And on the other hand, I think there will be an obscurity in a sense, because we'll see lots of awards and these very ingenious solutions. And then on the other hand, a sense of big storytelling really matter. And I think there'll be a discussion about how important is the big idea and big storytelling and gaining people's emotion versus actually technology and virtual reality and AI. And my view is there isn't an either or, but I think there'll be a fair bit of discussion around.
Well, Tamara Ingram, the Global Chief Executive of J. Walter Thompson, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
It's a great pleasure. Thanks very much, David. Great to be included.
Well, Doreen, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you,
nice
David.
to see you back again. Let's talk a little bit about the top 100 in terms of what's going on across the regions of the world.
U.S. brands continues to dominate the top 100. 71% of the total value is contributed by American brands, and which is a big growth, almost 200% in the past decade. Another massive grower is from China. And there was only one Chinese brand 12 years ago, and now it is 13 Chinese brands.
And we'll be coming on to talk specifically about China a little bit later on. When we look at the top 10 across the regions, what observations are there?
Yes, the country top 10. The US top 10 in total, the value is $1.4 trillion US dollars, and that is even bigger than the country GDP of Canada. And the China's top 10 is in total worth 367 billion US dollars, and we have one brand, Tencent, has surpassed the $100 billion threshold.
That is quite extraordinary. Taking a deep dive into the US, what do we see?
Yes, the US top 10, in addition to the tax fearsome 5, we also have AT&T, Visa, IBM, McDonald's, and Verizon on the top 10. And most of these brands has a healthy brand value increase over the past year.
And Latin America.
Latin America is very exciting. All
Looks like
beers.
looks like they have a lot of fun in Latin
Yes,
America. All
and the
beers.
Skol, Corona, Brahma, Aguila. So out of the beer top 10, 4 are from LATAM, and their value has increased by 23% over the past year, and they are doing very well.
And Asia, excluding China for the moment?
And in Asia, we are seeing Toyota, Samsung, NTT is the national telecom provider from Japan, and HDFC is our most valuable Indian brand, is a national Indian bank, which provide very strong, very superior brand, strong brand purpose, and also develop itself into an innovation platform and for many fintech companies.
And continental Europe, excluding the UK, I think our analysis, we've obviously left the euro already.
Right.
What do we see there?
Continental Europe is led by SAP and a leading technology company, and SAP has a very successful transition from a legacy software company and to now an integrated company and with strength in cloud service. Another brand worth highlighting is Hermes, and one of the luxury brands, as the other luxury brands are cutting back, and Hermes is leaning in and continue to invest in brand building and increase its production on its signature product. So Hermes brand value also achieved a significant growth.
And moving on to the United Kingdom, where we are today.
Yes, the UK is led by Vodafone. HSBC and Shell is doing very well in the last year, and we're seeing Shell is very collaborative in terms of with Toyota and the filling station for hydrogen cars, as well as making its communication more and more dynamic, doing very well in India and China.
Now, we've had a number of questions already on innovation, and given the way in which the world is moving fast, people are asking, is innovation an essential ingredient for valuable brands of the future?
Innovation is playing a more and more critical role, and this perceived innovation is very important, and especially for the consumers. From our past 10 years analysis, those brands perceived high on innovation has achieved a value growth which is 9 times faster than the average brand. And keep in mind, perceived innovation is not just your R&D investment. This is a holistic communication of what you do, all the new information you try to pass to the consumers. So this is a holistic communication. So your strong advertising, creative communication, great content are as important as your R&D investment.
Now, also a number of questions around the whole notion of trust and the importance of trust, and given in a sense how many of the big rubber baron American brands of the past are no longer, because they ate away at the trust of consumers. How important is trust today?
Trust is a very, very important asset, and any company needs to build, and gradually over time. And the trust is also quite a vulnerable asset. So when something happens, and the trust reputation can easily be damaged. And we're seeing that trust, especially like in faster growing market like China, and in some specific industries like a tech industry, and we have to protect it because it is becoming luxury. And so brands and brand builders, and we have to accumulate our reputation and accumulate these trustworthy images as time goes by.
Now, there is a full detailed analysis of every single sector and the regions in the full comprehensive report. And again, I'll give you details of how to download that in a moment. But let's move on to China. So big, so influential, soft and hard power now. It's impossible to ignore for any brand across the world.
Yeah, in the past decade, and the Chinese brand value has grown by tenfold. So in our global top 100, there was only one single child 10 years ago, and now there are 13 of them in the global top 100. And keep this in mind, a lot of them are very, very ambitious in terms of globalization. So you will see some new competitors from the other side of the world.
If you look at I suppose the change of value within China, that's also demonstrating the change of society and of politics in China too.
Yeah, Chinese brands are not all the same. They are divided into state-owned enterprises versus the private entrepreneurial brands. And in the past 10 years, in the past year alone, we are seeing the SOEs has declined the value. And in the meantime, those entrepreneurial private brands are increasing their value significantly. And they are more creative, and they are more innovative, and want to invest more in brand building. And the gap is starting to show up.
And that's, I suppose, very reflective of what's going on with society and consumer change in China.
Absolutely, and China is the economy is gradually moving from a structured and economy and to a consumer-driven, and the shared economy is getting very, very popular.
Now, the top 10 in China.
Yes, the top 10, the famous Tencent and Alibaba, we've already mentioned them, and it's absolutely worth highlighting Huawei, and probably a lot of you are using Huawei cell phone already, and Huawei is the most globalizing Chinese brands, now have already established their footprint in over 100 country markets.
It's impossible to go to pretty much any country in the world without seeing Huawei communication in one form or another.
They
pretty much as you get off the airport.
They occupy the entire airport. You won't be able to avoid them.
Doreen, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Now, it was some 8 years ago that we started doing individual brand valuations of countries and the brands within those countries. Our first one of those was China, and a few weeks ago we launched the BrandZ Top 100 Most Valuable Chinese Brands for 2017. And as part of that, we held a big event in Beijing, attended by over 1,000 clients, brand owners, opinion formers. And as part of that discussion, we held a CEO panel, global CEOs across the world, together with Chinese CEOs, discussing some of the issues related to China and building brands in China. Let's hear what they had to say.
It's a G2 world. If we look at our own industries and the incremental GDP growth for 2017, it's dominated by two countries, the US and China. And I think that will continue to be the case for a significant period of time. That gives the Chinese, in my view, a massive opportunity.
One of the biggest, I'll speak about China, one of the biggest strengths of China's attitude, the dedication, the believing in a better tomorrow, the going for it, the feeling, the self-responsibility to your own life. It's contagious. I must say, it's motivating to come over here and feel that.
When we look at the growth rate over the last 15 years of the dairy industry, it has passed already a stage there where you see like 20% growth each year. But however, if you look at the way the consumer changing, there are opportunities that the fresh dairy product, healthy product are getting a much higher growth, and we still can see a 15 to 20% growth. So the question to us is that, how are we able to change ourselves to meet the new, let's say, the new normal?
You have small competitors coming up. In one day's time, they are seen and heard and connecting with the world. The world is going to see reverse innovation out of China, new trends. The consumer in China is faster moving than any consumer in the world. So all these new dimensions are challenging for a company like ours, yet at the same time are huge opportunities.
But our learning has been, if we do not want disruptions to take over us, then we should disrupt ourselves first. Some of the worrisome industries, such as healthcare, education for that matter, finance, they're getting a new leaves of life because such entrepreneurial spirits of the founders or the leaders of the organizations are embracing technology.
We have seen many examples, very successful Chinese company, 10 years history, 15 years history, easily collapse, or, And so that's why I think today, when you look at brand, is really the single biggest asset.
China and the Chinese consumer has moved dramatically in the last 10, 15, 20 years in asking exactly and expecting exactly the same things that what we would consider as the more sophisticated, evolved consumers elsewhere.
I would say an increasing focus on quality over anything else. And that's not just quality in the way of the attributes of the product that you present and improve functionality, but it's also in the quality of how the company operates. It's a force for good for society, and I think is a way we can differentiate ourselves.
Well, I'm now here with Lindsay Patterson, who is the global CEO of Maxis. Lindsay, thanks very much indeed for joining us. We've seen the results of the BrandZ Top 100 Most Valuable Global Brands. We've seen a number of brands increase their value over a consistent number of years. You believe that for brands to continue to grow their value, their relationship with the consumer, that brands really now need to take a stand. Why is that?
Yeah, I think there's some really interesting trends around brand purpose. And I think last year was a tumultuous year. And I think the changes in the political systems, both in the US and in Europe, have meant that people are looking for more. They're searching behind walls. And they're looking for not only their leaders to take stands, but they're looking for their brands to try and do something, almost to fill the void of leadership that we now see in the world.
Is that not a very dangerous thing for a brand to do? I mean, we've seen brands take a stand on, on sustainability, which is, in a sense, good for everybody. And there's some big global leaders, businesses who've taken a stand on that.
I think it can be incredibly risky, and we're here in early May, and we just saw the disaster with Pepsi recently, where they tried to take a stand and did it in a very ill-judged way, because you can't be trite about a brand purpose. And I think in the past what companies have done is kind of got away with greenwashing. They've stated about a brand purpose, but meanwhile they've been relentlessly about making money. And I think today, when we look to consumers, and particularly millennials, that terribly overused word, but when we look at Gen Y, the younger end of millennials, actually doing good in the world and feeling like brands have a real purpose. And also, of course, because of the digital world, being able to look behind brands means you've got to try much harder than that. Yeah, I mean, I think consumers want to have a voice, and I think they know they're very powerful. So the days of talking or telling people what to think or what to go and choose are long gone. I think brands that are doing it better, and again, very recent example that you could compare to Pepsi with Heineken, who put consumers with opposing views into, I don't know if you've seen it.
I have, yes.
Yeah, into a room a bit like this, but with very widely divergent views, and then asked them to do some tasks together to have a conversation, and then eventually revealed their differences and then said, look, do you want to walk out or do you want to have a chat over a beer? So actually there was a purpose to that, and actually it linked back to the product as well. And I think that was incredibly smart, and it really, really resonated.
Now, what would you advise clients who are, and brands who are thinking about, you know, what should their sort of purpose be, or what should their stand be? How do they go about creating, developing that in a way that it's fit with the brand?
Yeah, I mean, it's a terribly overused word, but it has to be authentic to the brand. You can't just do a poll and decide what kind of cause you're going to go after. I think it has to have a meaning to a brand. So when brands are incredibly powerful is when passion meets purpose. So that's what brands should really look for. And that's when you're successful, because you're doing it because you're passionate about it and there's a real drive. The media world today allows us to be much more precise in targeting our audience, because we have so much data at our fingertips. We can understand much more in a much more nuanced way versus, you know, old-fashioned survey data, understanding how people truly think and believe. So I do think it changes it changes where we put that content, and crucially it would be in environments where there's always a return path where people can have a conversation, because that's what the brand is trying to do. But I think, you know, my passion and my purpose has been female equality. So we created a program last year called Walk the Talk. We've taken 280 of our most senior women around the world on a program to understand any of our own limiting beliefs, any kind of internal barriers we're putting up to success. Because when we look across our industry, whether it's media or advertising or any part of comms, we just don't have enough women in senior positions. And then broaden that out into the business world, and it's even worse. So that's my passion and has been our purpose. And I think it was really important that the CEO has to stand behind it. And to WPP's credit, Martin has now talked about gender equality being the most important cause that WPP, and we've signed up to the UN Common Ground Agenda for gender equality and to try and achieve gender equality by 2030.
And how important has it been for you to bring the organisation with you on that? Because you know, it's pretty easy, I suppose, for the CEO, global CEO like you to say that's how it's going to be. But presumably...
I'd love to think I had that. It was that easy and I had that much control.
I'm sure you have that much control.
Yeah, it's influence, not control, isn't it? But you start with a business case. You know, a better, diverse leadership creates better business decisions. People with diverse leaders on boards make better financial returns. So you can go back to the facts. And actually, really the crucial one in advertising on gender equality, you look at our consumers. We have to be reflective of the consumers that we are talking to. So that's both in the communications that we're doing. So how about men do the laundry sometimes, and women don't make all the decisions on makeup. They sometimes make car decisions, and they even take out bank accounts. I'm being trite, but women actually make the majority of consumer decisions. So if we are not
we're
talking
certainly
to
doing
them,
my household, that's for sure.
Yeah, if we're not talking to them in an empathetic way, then that doesn't make any sense in the business in which we're all involved. So I think it's a no-brainer.
Fantastic. Well, Lindsay, thank you very much for joining us. Much appreciated.
Pleasure.
Well, each year when we look at where the BrandZ fieldwork should take place, we look at adding a new interesting market. Last year it was Myanmar, and this year it's Cuba. And here to talk about our Cuba report and the data from BrandZ Cuba is Martin, who project managed the research in Cuba. Really interesting. Consumers are very brand aware in Cuba.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I think before our time there, our assumption, certainly my assumption, was that Cuban consumers would know very little about brands, but actually during our interviews they were telling us they very much do make decisions based on brand rather than just price. And I think their brand savviness comes from several areas. One is they receive something called El Paquete Semanal, which translates as the weekly package, which is basically the offline internet on USB sticks, which they can also upload to mobiles, which contains movies, TV shows, and obviously advertising as well. And also the sheer volume of branded goods that are posted back to the community by Cuban expats, particularly from Miami. So I think it was obvious quite quickly that the Cuban consumer is more brand savvy and more brand aware than perhaps we expected. There's definitely, through
our analysis of the data, a first mover advantage in Cuba from a brand perspective, given where we are? I mean, this really was the very first study ever done in Cuba that really looked at the status of brands today.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's one thing being brand aware, but on BrandZ we have a way of classifying brands based on the level of knowledge that consumers have. And we looked at the data across the 4 categories that we studied. So we studied beer, soft drinks, tobacco and coffee. We found a much greater incidence of what we call clean slate brands, which essentially means consumers are aware of the brands but are not able to verbalise much about what that brand actually offers. So certainly there is a first mover advantage, and certainly some of the big companies, the Unilevers and Nestle's, already have a presence.
Now, social sort of networking in the physical world, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so again, it kind of goes back to my assumptions about Cuba before we were there. So our assumptions were very much that advertising is banned, which turns out not to be the case. So advertising isn't banned, but it is tightly controlled by the government. It needs to be on message and to the benefit of the population. So one of the ways that brands can actually start to build that connection with consumers is through PR. So Google did a very successful sponsorship in Havana in 2016 of an art exhibition. So I think that shows the power that PR can have, and the fact that the usual rules of advertising are really not applicable to Cuba as yet.
Now, part of the analysis that we did on the brands that we looked at in Cuba was looking at their brand personality.
Yeah, so I think this started out as a bit of fun, but it became increasingly clear that given Cuba's brands are really a reflection of Cuba's history. So when we looked at brand personality through our CharacterZ tool, we saw that the incidence of brands that were seen as rebellious, or rebel brands as we call them, was far higher, in fact more than twice as high as we typically see in the global database, which I think is indicative of the history of the island. And I think the assumption could be that this is reflective of the categories we picked, but this data and analysis is actually controlled for those categories, and the pattern remains. So not only do we see more rebellious brands, but those brands that are classified in that way are actually far more clear-cut versus the typical global rebel brand as well.
I'm sure Fidel would be pleased and proud to hear that.
Absolutely.
Now, we looked at a number of different categories. What are the most powerful brands in Cuba today?
Yeah, so the one that really stuck out was, perhaps not surprisingly, Havana Club, which definitely has a big presence on the global stage already. I've certainly been a fan for a while in my Cuba Libre. So I think there are others, though, that are starting to slowly get a foothold as things start to open up politically and economically. Cristal Beer is another, which is beginning to play in a number of different markets globally. And I think from what we saw during our time there, the sheer amount of entrepreneurship, the local businesses that are starting to spring up, brands like Havana Club and Cristal certainly won't be the last Cuban players on the global stage.
Well, just before you go, Martin, another couple of questions around this whole notion of maybe brands are going to get so big that they lose connection and trust as well with their consumers. What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, I think certainly we're seeing the stronger getting stronger, the dominance of what we've called the fearsome five. But I think the world we live in these days, the tools at all of our fingertips from a technological perspective really make it much easier for brands to truly disrupt and take innovative ideas to market quickly. And just looking at a brand like Snapchat, which didn't exist 6 years ago, it's now one of our new entrants into the top 100 this year. So I think trust is obviously important, but certainly there is the opportunity to disrupt those big players and keep them honest, if you like, and that will continue into the future.
Lovely. Martin Guerrero, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Now, you can get hold of a copy of the Cuba report from the link that I'll give you at the end of the programme. The report is absolutely cram-packed full of contextual understanding of the Cuban market, some quite amazing photography from Cecile, and an understanding of the status of brands in Cuba. And I highly recommend you all download that as soon as you can, but not now, because many of you might not have ever heard of Refinery 29, but Refinery 29 is having a great impact across the world. Let's hear why. Well, Kate, thanks very much indeed for joining us. Perhaps we could start off, because many people watching today probably wouldn't have heard of Refinery 29, or if they have, don't really know it in great depth. So perhaps you can give us a little overview of who you are and what you do.
Yeah, absolutely, and thank you so much. It's a real honour to be part of this program. Refinery 29 is a media company for women. We talk to an audience of over 500 million women a month across all of our channels globally. We connect with women by telling stories that matter most to them. Everything from style, fashion and beauty content, all the way through to global news, politics, wellness, health, and really all of the subjects that interest them in between around their lifestyle, finance, fitness, interior decor. So we're really building a really rich ecosystem for young women of content everywhere from Snapchat, where we have a Discover channel, we're one of the original partners, all the way through to our owned and operated site, an email newsletter, and of course Facebook and other social channels.
Now we're hearing a lot in the press and indeed even in the report for the BrandZ Top 100 Most Valuable Global Brands for this year about millennial and the impact that millennials are having for brands, brand owners and marketing. At least 50% of millennials are women. Give us a feel for what are the issues that are impacting millennial women at the moment.
I think it's a really interesting term, the term millennial. I think at Refinery we see it more as a mindset. We see it as a set of characteristics that bind together a generation, but quite a broad generation. I think we see global connectedness as a real attribute of this audience. They're participating in an always-on global content culture. Beyonce announces her pregnancy with one Instagram post, and it's seen by millions in every country in the world. Films are released, albums are released, fashion lines are observed. So really they're participating in global culture and a global news cycle. At the same time, they're more globally conscious than ever. They're participating in wider narratives about politics, about sustainability. So really, it's a global generation. The second is that it's a generation that are really driven by purpose. We've seen this again and again in our studies with our audience, that this is a generation that are demanding more of the world in which they live. 85% of our audience say that they would switch to a brand that aligned better with their values. So this is a purpose-driven generation that are hoping to participate positively in the world in which they live and demanding the same from both the influencers but also from the brands that they're consuming and interacting with. I think,
but it's not a generation that doesn't like marketing, is it?
Absolutely
or
not.
Or being marketed to, or being communicated with.
Absolutely not, and I think that that's one of the kind of common misconceptions about this audience. They actually truly reward brands that positively interact with them. Refinery has excelled at connecting brands to our influential audience of women, particularly young women. We do that by creating compelling content with a specific tone of voice and a narrative in our environment. We don't see that women don't want to consume or interact with content that is funded by or integrates brands. The opposite of that is true. I think a really interesting example this year from the US, we created a program called the 67% Project. It was a program that spoke to how plus-size women were represented in the US. 67% of women in the US are above a size 14, yet they're only represented in 2% of media. We wanted to change that. We created a whole program that aimed to truly represent women. We did that in partnership with Lane Bryant and Aerie, putting them absolutely at the heart of that conversation. I think one of the most interesting things we did was partner with Getty. We created a whole new image archive of plus-size women, and we made that available free so that people could use those images. So there's now no excuse not to have representative images of women. Now, our audience absolutely loved that program. It generated 500 million press impressions and millions of social interactions.
So
that's a great example of where a brand leads a conversation that is relevant and impactful to this audience, and that's what they want to see.
And what are the lessons that brand owners today need to learn in order to be able to communicate successfully to millennial women?
I think the first is thinking back to those attributes. One is that sense of global connectedness. Two is rooting those communications, that content in purpose, and truly understanding. And I think the third is really about celebrating individuality. This is a generation who are very, very conscious of self-expression and wanting to be seen as individuals. They lead very layered and textured lives and have identities online that they've crafted as individuals. Programs that homogenize young women's experience, that don't represent them, won't succeed. And that's why at Refinery things like celebrating diversity, ensuring that you're using models that are representative so people can see themselves in the content. That's absolutely critical to making an impact with this generation.
Now, you just recently completed a very interesting study on millennial women. Tell us a little bit about them.
Yeah, we recently did an interesting study on motherhood and the road to motherhood. Obviously, millennial women as an age bracket, let's call sort of 18 to 35, a lot of them are young mums thinking about having babies. Maybe they've had one and they're thinking about having another one. But I think what's interesting is that this isn't the straightforward path, perhaps, that it used to be. What we're seeing is that women are having a much more varied experience than ever before. It's not so much a career ladder, but a career roller coaster. They may move home with their parents in their 30s to save up to buy that flat. And it's not always the case that you get married and have a baby and that's the course that you take. Many women are choosing not to have children, focus on other things. The study really called upon that variety of experience and tried to unpack it, to try and really truly understand how women felt about the road to motherhood and how they were marketed to by brands and also by traditional media in that context.
I mean, given how many brands there are out there and a number in this year's BrandZ Top 100 whose sort of core target audience is mums in one form or another, what would you say the three most important learnings for those brand owners would be coming out of the study?
I think absolutely the first is that women are really, really keen not to lose their sense of self as they enter motherhood. We saw that 93% still want to be able to pursue their passions and interests after they become a mother. It isn't the only thing that defines them. The second thing is that while social media in particular has been a great source of information and community for mums, offering them interesting perspectives on how to raise their children perhaps, or the road to motherhood, they also more than ever feel the pressure to be perfect, to present a picture of perfection. And we all know that life isn't really like that. And in fact, what we heard a lot was that there are some social media portrayals of motherhood where you only show the bad stuff, but again, you've artfully decorated as your baby has thrown their supper all over you, which certainly isn't the case in my house or many of my friends. So I think understanding that social pressure is important. I think the third thing, and I think this is really, really important, is again in representation. Are there lots of different types of parenthood that are being represented today? How do working mums feel when all of the marketing is about mums who are staying at home? How do mums who are staying at home feel if their particular style of parenting isn't represented as positive or impactful? So the biggest single lesson, I think, is we have to represent women better. We have to talk to them more as individuals. It's very, very hard to do with a mass media approach, but I think absolutely this core of individuality needs to be better represented in order to reach them.
I was very surprised in the study what a role model Claire Underwood was.
Yes.
Why?
Claire Underwood from House of Cards as sort of the number one pick of role models. Look, I think she's uncompromising. She sort of goes for what she wants. She's not afraid to break out of boxes, to challenge stereotypes, to challenge convention. Perhaps not the obvious role model, but I think that those attributes of challenging inherited wisdom, of being seen as uncompromisingly oneself, speak to this trait of individuality that we really need to be focused on.
Well, it'd be interesting to see the new series. What is just starting. So it'd be interesting to see when I get to that binge watching what her character changes and develops in. Where can people get more information about Refinery 29 from?
Absolutely, really simple, refinery29.com. If you want to go to our website, you can check us out on Snapchat, our Discover channel, or on Facebook. You know, if you enjoy it, sign up. We have a daily email that brings all of our style and substance right there. So there's absolutely lots of ways to find us, and yeah, thank you very much for inviting us to be part of this.
Thank you very much indeed for being with us today.
Thank you.
Well, it's difficult to get hold of Sir Martin Sorrell given his schedule. It's equally difficult to get hold of Eric Salama, the Chairman and Chief Executive of Kantar, as pretty much every day he's travelling to various different Kantar operations around the world. But I did manage to catch up with Eric via a very dodgy Skype line when he was in Scandinavia, and we had to find a place in the room that had a good Wi-Fi connection. So it looks a little bit like he's actually inside a prison cell, but I can assure you he wasn't. And I asked Eric, what value is there for WPP and our clients in doing brand valuations?
I think the main thing is that it takes the discussion about brands into the boardroom and into the CEO conversation. And at a time when all of our clients are questioning how much they ought to invest in brand building, I think it's the single best thing that exists, not just within WPP, but across the industry, to actually make it a conversation about financial value, not just some interesting research metric.
And how important do you think it is now to have that conversation about financial returns in terms of brand investment as opposed to just image returns?
I think it's never been more important. We all have conversations with clients who question the amount of money they ought to spend, how they ought to spend their money. We have zero-based budgeting all over most of our clients. We need to have something like BrandZ to really help us have a conversation which is about the value to those clients and the return on investment of investing in their brands. And it's, as I say, it's the single best tool that exists in the industry, bar none, to have that conversation.
Eric, you sit at Kantar, sort of the epicenter of understanding and really seeing consumer change. What change are you seeing across the Kantar companies in terms of what they're seeing consumers doing differently than they have done in the past? And what implications does that have for brand building in terms of growing value?
I guess everything's become a bit more blurred and a bit more integrated. So obviously within the marketing function, for quite a while now, we've seen clients approach things in a more integrated way and want to think about all forms of media, obviously driven by digital more than anything else these days, but TV, digital, everything. I think what's interesting now, and we've seen it in the way that clients like Unilever have reorganized, and it's always been there in the way that clients like Ford have organized, is that the trade and the shopper side and the channel side of it have also become equally important. And most of our clients spend more on the channel side and on the trade side than they do on the classic brand building consumer side. So I think more and more there's a conversation going on about how do we spend our money effectively, and that includes the channel as well as the consumer. It includes all of their customers as well as the end person.
So all roads seem to lead back to proving efficiency and cost effectiveness of spend and effort.
Yeah, I think that's right, and we're seeing great success with tools like Kantar Retail's Excel, which is a tool in trade promotion optimization. And a few years ago, that would have been something just for a few geeks within a client organization. That's now a board level decision as to who they partner with, and it's a decision which the IT director and the marketing director get together to have a conversation about. So in an era, as I say, in an era of zero-based budgeting, the most important thing that we can do is make the case to our clients of the importance of long-term and very optimized spending.
Looking into the future, Eric, artificial intelligence was pretty much something of science fiction. It's now become very much sort of business fact. What do you see the future of artificial intelligence within Kantar in terms of understanding data? And how do you best mix artificial intelligence, AI, with HI, human intelligence?
Well, just over the weekend, funnily enough, other than watching Arsenal win at Wembley, the two things that I was focusing most on was Garry Kasparov was around doing a series of interviews about the anniversary of him losing to the IBM supercomputer for the first time, and DeepMind that were acquired by Google have just beaten the world champion Go player in China. Now, those are incredible advancements, and I'm not sure that any of us really know where AI is going to go within 10 years. Its ability to do things is astounding and is moving at a very fast pace. I think if you look at the work that we do, when there's more and more data, yes, a supercomputer and an AI computer can help. But actually, it's really important to start with some hypotheses. And I think one of the things that has changed has been, as more and more data becomes available, actually you do need a view of how the world is working, and you do need a view of what's driving people's behavior and some of the motivations to enable some of the tools that you've got, AI or otherwise, to actually do their best. So I do still think that there are lots and lots of areas, and that our business for the foreseeable future will be that combination of much heavier analytics, but also much heavier understanding and storytelling and hypothesis building as to what's actually needed.
Now, this is the first year of your Kantar First strategy. What have been the benefits so far to clients and also WPP colleagues around the world, and how do you see that panning out over the next year?
Well, a number of us, Martin and Tam and Iggy, and a number of us were at a top-to-top meeting with the Danone management in Paris last week, and they spontaneously said, for the first time, we feel like we're getting the best of Kantar, and that when I ask a question about a particular issue, I don't need to worry who I'm asking that question of. I know that I'm going to get people working together seamlessly to actually address that question, which is obviously a fantastic thing to hear, and it delivers huge value to a client like Danone. Now, we're not there yet. I mean, I don't believe that we're delivering that kind of level seamlessly, consistently across all of our clients in every part of the world. So we've still got a way to go, but I think we've now got lots and lots of examples of whether it's an existing client or a new business pitch, and we've just had the same example in terms of winning all of Shell's work around the world. Whether it's an existing client or a new business pitch, we've now got examples of where people coming together add value and deliver impact to a client in the way that no one else can, and that we certainly weren't doing consistently before. So I think the evidence is there. We just need to keep on changing our behaviors. We need to keep on practicing. We need to make it an instinct as opposed to something which is special, but we're getting there. I think from a WPP colleague point of view, I hope that we've become easier to work with, that it's less random as to who you speak to, as to what solution you get. You can speak to anyone, and we should be able to navigate what is still quite a complex company for our other WPP colleagues and make it easier for you.
So what advice do you give to WPP colleagues watching this to tap into the new Kantar?
Find the person that you get on well with the best. Find someone who really understands your business, and use them as a kind of human portal into the rest of Kantar.
And finally, Eric, 2 days' time it's the election in the United Kingdom. I know you're a very keen follower of politics. It's been been seen a very sort of lacklustre, boring campaign. So finally, Eric, is watching the UK elections more or less exciting than watching Arsenal play?
Well, Arsenal is by far and away more frustrating, and obviously much more important.
Well, Eric Salama, Chairman and Chief Executive of Kantar, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thanks, David.
Well, at BrandZ, we like to practice what we preach. We've been talking about how important innovation is and how important technology is in terms of all of our lives and how we're using it. And now I would like to introduce you to our latest way of you getting access to BrandZ data. Alexa, ask Rosie about brands.
Hello, I'm BrandZ Rosie. Thanks for your interest. Can I ask your name?
David.
Nice to meet you, David. Would you like to talk about this year's Global Brands Top 100 Brands?
Yes.
That's great. Where would you like to start? Maybe look at a particular brand.
Let's talk about Google.
Would you like to know about the Google brand performance in 2017?
Yes.
Google is positioned at number 1 with a value of $245,581. Its brand contribution is 4. Brand value percentage change 2017 versus 2016 is 7% and rank change is 0.
How many newcomers?
This year there are 7 newcomers.
Who are this year's newcomers?
This year's newcomers in the Global Brands Top 100 are Xfinity, YouTube, HPE, Salesforce, Netflix, Snapchat, and Sprint.
Who is this year's top newcomer?
The highest newcomer in the top 100 is Xfinity.
Thank you very much, Rosie. Well, I'm now joined by Mike Smollen, who is the Chief Growth and Innovation Officer for Smollens. Mike, thanks very much indeed for joining us. We just heard Eric Salama talk about actually how much money, in a sense, and thought is moving into the retail environment in one form or another. That's the sweet spot of Smollens, your business.
Yes.
From where you sit at the moment, how do you view the opportunities for brands to build their brand value in the retail environment?
So I think it's correct. I think what we're seeing is we're seeing a lot of tightening around different areas of marketing, and I think one of the sort of last places that you turn to squeeze is your people in store and your people on the ground, your sort of sales force and your execution force and your promoter force. So while we may not see too much growth in the area, we're certainly seeing a resilience towards these cuts. I think if we sort of say where is there place to build value, it depends where we define the store, but if we sort of say that it's the ecosystem around physical retail as a start, there are a couple of areas. The one is kind of consistency, so consistency of messaging to the consumer, consistency of availability and of presence. I think that we often overlook the consistency of a brand's presence to a consumer and that consumer's ability to purchase that brand, and the communication from sort of the brand to that person. Now, while we've seen in modern retail many different ways for the brand to approach the consumer, whether it's social media, whether it's a person in store, whether it's an activation, that interaction is becoming much more important. So the sort of B2C interaction and at the point of purchase, I think, is the best place for a brand to focus in building its value, perhaps its total value, but certainly its in-store value.
Now, you operate in highly developed markets in terms of retail and sort of young markets like Myanmar on the other extreme in terms of retail development. What common themes are there across any of those?
I think you know, obviously the use of digital, I think e-commerce is of course a common theme, and sort of the move of traditional bricks and mortar retailer categories to e-commerce spaces or e-retailer spaces. So that's certainly a trend, and I think that a lot of markets are almost skipping iterations of physical retail, which we've seen in various technologies, you know, landline, laptop, computer, that sort of thing. I think that the use of digital and the messaging to consumers we're seeing as an easily replicated sort of system, for lack of a better explanation. I think that the way that very developed markets are targeting consumers can be replicated wherever, because almost the route to consumer is becoming homogenous globally. Once we get to a full, and I don't think we'll ever get there, but once we sort of get to a bulky e-retail world, if you think about it, the kind of messaging will be easy to work across different markets. Having said that, I think that we still see a very similar evolution across markets. So, you know, where we're seeing it faster, so places like China, the movement from general trade to modern trade to e-retail is happening much faster. In certain markets, it's happening at the same speed. You know, if you think about sort of some of the Southeast Asian countries, if you think about the African countries, because the distribution capability is very different to what it is in the developed world, we kind of have to go through the hurdles of the normal evolution to get to developed markets. I also think that the investment from brands has been strangled very recently. I mean, we've seen what's happening sort of in the world and what's happening to brands. And so the creation of localized innovation in some of these markets is being put on hold because the bigger markets need to be serviced to keep the volume in those markets. You know, so you really don't get going forward this fantastic investment into innovation of brand and retail that you would ordinarily sort of 5 or 6 years ago.
I mean, digital is clearly having a transformative effect in terms of communication in consumers' lives. We haven't yet seen massive digital in-store. Do you think that's about to change?
I think that there'll be a sort of convergence and then a merge. I think that what we've seen is digital approach the consumer outside of the store, you know, whether that be through social media, through an app, through whatever is driving people to a certain place or driving them to a retailer. I think once they get to a store, what we're seeing is the kind of access points are being created. So whether that's digital couponing, whether it's image recognition, whatever is sort of combining those two areas is the entry point. I hope that we get to a point where, you know, augmented reality or a retailer builds an in-store experience around digital, but in a physical environment. So they piggyback off the physical infrastructure, but add a sort of digital layer to make that experience a bit better. But so far, we really haven't seen anything that is in that, you know, creating in-store theater, pushing people to physical bricks and mortar. We've almost seen it as a challenge between e-retail and physical, which I think is incorrect. I mean, certainly from a brand's perspective.
Well, Mike Smollen, the Chief Growth and Innovation Officer for Smollen's, thanks very much, Steve, for joining us.
Thank you. Great to be here as always.
Seven years ago, we did our very first country ranking, and that was China. Since then, we have done India, Indonesia, Latin America, Brazil, and Saudi Arabia. And that's done on an annual basis. 2017 brings the country rankings to another dimension. Another 6 individual countries will be included in 2017. Spain, Italy, France, Germany, UK, and the USA. Stay tuned and keep watching the BrandZ website for an announcement of when each of those individual rankings will be launched. And make sure that you have installed on your mobile device the BrandZ app, because the moment that the rankings are released, that data will magically appear on your app. Keep watching. Well, we've almost come to the very end of our journey of the BrandZ Top 100 Most Valuable Global Brands for 2017 live webinar here from our studio in London. As I said, all the material that you've seen today, plus a whole raft more, is available to you to download from the URL you see here. Just take a quick picture of that so you can log on and download everything that you want for yourself, to share with your teams, and also, most importantly, to share with your clients. This is the report. It's 300 pages plus of the most amazing insight analysis from not only BrandZ experts, but from the brand experts from around WPP companies right across the world. And I really do urge you to download this and to look at it and review it and to use it in your sessions and meetings with clients and in your new business activity as well. I'll also be letting you know how you can speak to your own Alexa, and also introducing you to our new BrandZ bot, which will allow you through the website to interact with the data much easier than you can currently. All that will be coming to you very soon. All that remains for me to say on this day in London, where we pay tribute to those people who were killed and injured in the latest obscene terrorist attack. We wish them a speedy recovery, and to the victims of terror around the world. From me, David Roth, at WPP, thank you very much indeed, and thank you to everybody who participated in this program and who produced it as well. And those names will follow. Have a fantastic day.